Well, good evening. I hope that, this is a little bit better of an atmosphere for you this evening than outside. It's a little crazy. I was basking in the 90-degree heat yesterday and was excited to lay out and get rid of some of my albino today, but that didn't work out. So, unfortunately, we're in a much better spot tonight, and I'm so excited to introduce our speaker for this evening. He is definitely in the field of my interest, and my name is Tiffany Ricky, and I'm here with Kirsten Wiesenhand. She just told me, and so anyways, she's our right hand, my right hand to make sure that everything goes okay here. She's been doing wonderful. She works for summer sessions. So tonight, Dr. Coker is going to talk to us about health and longevity in the last frontier. And Robert Trey Coker, PhD, is an associate professor in the Department of Biology and Wildlife and serves as principal investigator in the Institute of Arctic Biology, Center for Alaska Native Health Research. After serving as a tenured faculty member in the Department of Geriatrics at the University of Arkansas for over a decade, he still maintains an affiliation as an adjunct associate professor. He's also co-owner of Essential Blends, LLC, a medical nutrition company. And he is the president-elect of the Alaska chapter of the American College of Sports Medicine. He obtained his PhD from the University of Mississippi and was then a research fellow at Vanderbilt University School of Medicine prior to completing an awesome clinical fellowship at Copenhagen Muscle Research Center in Denmark. I learned a little bit about that briefly. Dr. Coker's research interests include exercise physiology, metabolic stress, and clinical nutrition. He has been the principal investigator on several grants from the National Institutes on Health, American Heart Association, and the Veterans Administration. He has published over 50 papers and given numerous regional, national, and international presentations during his 20 years as a research scientist. Amidst all that time, he and his family have been moved to Fairbanks, Alaska in May of 2013, so he's getting used to our winters and summers and our rhythm up here. His wife, Sherry, who's here today, there's Sherry, and their children, Quint and Kiplin, enjoy the outdoor lifestyle and the new adventures that Alaska has to offer. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Trey Coker.
Wow, that's a lot of stuff. I'm scared to give that guy's talk. And if you can figure those lights out, I'll be impressed. I've been here for 2 years and I haven't done it yet. But I don't mind them twinkling on and off as we get started. Let me just say that. Pardon?
He needs a microphone.
Microphone? I need the microphone?
Yeah.
It's over on the left.
Okay, here we go. Wow, this is going to be different. I haven't used a microphone before. I wasn't. Can you hear that better? Does that work? All right. I feel like I'm about to give a concert or something. Just let me say to start with, I'm humbled by the experience in the room. Normally when I'm in this auditorium, the individuals sitting in those seats are 20 years old and plus or minus 2 or 3. So I appreciate you coming to the presentation. This evening. And it's just kind of the way it is. It starts off with a bang. But I hope that you'll find some things interesting about the talk. And some of you may be wondering, a guy from a hillbilly from northern Georgia, how did he end up in central Alaska? Well, Alaska has this thing where they have to recruit a certain number of rednecks per year. No, all joking aside, we had been coming up here for a few years. I knew about the university. I knew about the biology group and some of the wildlife faculty here. And it just, to me, represented a tremendous opportunity to do something different and do something impactful. And I really wanted to have that chance. And so we talked about it, and thing here. What I want to talk to you today about, and I mean this picture kind of represents one of the reasons we decided to come. I mean, it's a rainbow, a picture of a rainbow that we took from our front porch. And this is just one of those great things that you get to enjoy and are encouraging as you live your day-to-day life. And so I want to talk today about some terms that I'm sure some of you are familiar with, and that is health and longevity. And when I use the term longevity, it is equivocal in a lot of ways to quality of life, not the length of life necessarily, but health and longevity, those two dovetail together. In other words, how do we optimize our life so that we live a relatively long life, but we're also mostly healthy throughout that life? And how do we use nutrients and physical activity, especially in the context of Alaska or in the last frontier? One of the things that I tell students and classes that I teach and students that I work with and in different projects is the really neat thing about Alaska is we have an all-inclusive gym membership that includes all these things like rock climbing, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, hiking, kayaking, rafting, running, and it just goes on and on and on. It's not a matter of what you can do here. It's a matter of how much time you have to do it. And you just have to kind of pick something. We also have a tremendous source, a variety of sources of meat protein in Alaska, and we have 5 species of salmon. You know how many salmon you have in Arkansas? All right. If you catch a fish that's 14 inches long and you can keep it, it's a great day. Here, I mean, I won't say inexhaustible, but from a comparative standpoint, it's astonishing. 8 small game species and 14 big game species. In fact, one of my cousins asked me, said, "Well, you move up there, you're not going to be able to hunt deer and turkeys anymore. What are you going to do?" I was like, "Seriously?" One of the problems that we have with respect to health in the United States and really throughout the world, and you can see this map, red means bad, or not necessarily bad, but it means widespread existence of obesity. It's not just an exclusive membership dedicated to the United States and North America anymore. It's in parts of the Middle East, Australia, and South America. So this problem has kind of perpetuated itself throughout the world in many respects, largely due to the fact that food is relatively cheap compared to what it used to be, and it's not that hard to go out and get. In fact, the food that's better for you oftentimes, and almost all the time, generally costs more. We took this, or I actually took this picture and made Trey pull over on the drive up here about halfway through Kansas and said, "Oh my gosh, a pink Cadillac with diner on it, and what could be better?" That kind of epitomizes in a lot of ways some of the problems with the American lifestyle and how it has a negative impact on health and longevity, and contributes to this situation here, which I've actually worked with a lot of individuals over the past few years doing intervention-based studies. I didn't actually take this picture. I pulled this off the internet. But this is kind of a classic problem where somebody has abdominal obesity, a lot of fat inside the abdominal cavity, which is really has a negative impact on our health and longevity. So I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we got millions of people living throughout the world that have or are affected by obesity, especially in North America. This is associated with a high risk of morbidity and mortality. Socioeconomic status plays a significant role in the prevalence of obesity. Even though we have the problem of being overweight and becoming overweight is significant in Alaska, it's not near as bad as it is in Arkansas. It's not near as bad as it is in Mississippi. And you can see here the top 5 percentages for obesity are Mississippi, West Virginia, Michigan, Kentucky, and Indiana. So kind of that area of the United States really has a significant problem. And in conjunction with that, about 40% of the adults in the United States do not participate in any type of leisure time physical activity. That's really astonishing if you think about that. I mean, no physical activity per se whatsoever in their life. And say, well, why is this important? What difference does it make? I've heard that I can be obese and I can be healthy obese and all that. Well, let me tell you this. Obesity is closely connected with the incidence of diabetes, period. And with diabetes in and of itself, I tell my students in my classes, if you just had high blood sugar and it didn't have any impact on your health, who cares? But here are the impact points here. Stroke strongly associated with stroke, heart disease, kidney disease, autonomic neuropathy, poor blood supply to the lower limbs. In fact, if you go to the VA hospital, and I spent some time as a scientist with the VA, the chances of seeing someone that's an amputee due to the complications of diabetes are much higher than some kind of combat-related event. Not to dismiss the importance of combat-related events. That's not the point. The point is just the opposite. It's that diabetes has a tremendous impact on our health, even something that we might not normally associate it with. Now, as we get older, another thing that we face, we got all these challenges, right, with life. But as we get older, another thing that happens, and this is actually an MRI. Any of you ever had an MRI? It's just like taking your leg or whatever they're interested in, taking what they call a cross-sectional picture of it. Like if I could slice my leg like that, which I wouldn't want to do, but with an MRI, I can do it very non-invasively, and I can compare a young, healthy person's leg to an older person. See the difference between the two? One has a lot more, you could just say, continuity when it comes to the skeletal muscle itself. The other one, not so much. Now, what happens is when we're 59 years old, on the average scale, when we're 59, 60 years old, about 25% of us have this thing called sarcopenia. And sarcopenia really means poverty of the flesh. Well, none of us wants to be in poverty. And what this term means is that we're losing our muscle. And by 80 years old, about 50% of us are classified as being sarcopenic. That's not good, because as we lose our skeletal muscle, we have all these age-related changes that are specifically related to loss of muscle. And it's interesting. I hope you can read this, but it says, aging, muscle weakness, reduced endurance capacity, muscle wasting, decrease in physical activity. All these things are closely connected to a lot of the things we typically, and I just described to you, association with type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So when we combine, the point being, is when we combine these two things together, it's not good. Right? It contributes to a very challenging situation called sarcopenic obesity. And say, gosh, boy, I thought I was going to hear some really good information. I'm getting to that. I want to set the stage first. And I'm a scientist, so I'm going to talk some scientist talk. All right? I'm going to present some data to you. We can't help it. It's just something that lies within our geek brain. We have to do it. All right? But hopefully I can explain it to you in such a way that it'll make sense, and you'll come away going, oh, I actually learned something. Now, all I want you to get, and this is what I'll try to do with these slides, is tell you, what's the take-home message? Well, as we age, the take-home message here is our thigh muscle area decreases, and that's closely associated with a decrease in knee extensor strength and aerobic capacity. All right? That's the take-home message in that particular slide. So that previous MRI that I showed you, this data corresponds with that MRI to show what's the functional impact. My strength goes down and my functional capacity goes down. Now, when I combine sarcopenic obesity together and look at the risk of mortality, down here at the bottom is survival data. And what that means is the longer this goes out, the better. Does that make sense? Like the further out this, scientists call this the x-axis. The further this goes out, the better off I am. The more survival I've got, the longer I'm going to live. When I have just obesity by itself, I live longer. But when I combine sarcopenia with obesity, it shortens my lifespan dramatically. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, one of the things you might not know, and this is very important, stay with me on this, might not know, is that strength is a very important predictor of mortality in older people. Now, if you look at over here on the left side of this graph, don't get too confused with all this. This is cancer mortality, and this is just all-cause mortality. But the point in this whole figure is if I look on the left side, this is in young people. If I have low muscle strength, which is characterized by the green bar, versus high muscle strength, which is characterized by the white bar, and I'm young, it doesn't really make any difference, or my muscle strength is not a very strong predictor of my risk of mortality. But look what happens when I get older. When I'm greater, I think this is greater than 60 years old, look what happens to my risk of mortality. If I'm weak, the risk of mortality increases substantially. And that's what many people don't realize, that really there's nothing that's a stronger predictor of all-cause mortality than low muscle strength. That's why, how many of you have had a family member go to the hospital for whatever, let's say it's a broken hip. They repair the hip, they get another infection, next thing you know, they're in the hospital a little bit longer than they should have been, they come back home, and they can't ever recover. They can't ever get back to where they're going to the grocery store on their own. People have to help them. They end up going to nursing home. It's kind of a, I hate to use the term, but you have to be honest about it, a downhill spiral. And it's perpetuated by the fact they're kind of at a low threshold to start with, and once they lose that requisite muscle strength to take care of themselves, it's a bad situation. It's a difficult situation. Well, that's the bad news. The good news is we're living in a great place to offset some of these problems. One of the best places, I think, in the world. We've got 322 million acres of public land, 12,000 rivers. 12,000? I pulled this off the internet. I'm pretty sure it's real. 6,600 miles of coastline. It was a reputable site. I think like the Geological Society or something like that. They were pretty reputable. This is a picture we actually took on our honeymoon. That contributes to happiness right there, being able to look at that. So you got the combination of activity, food sources, and a high quality of life. That certainly gives you an advantage. I'm cheating here just a little bit, showing you a picture of a backstrap, but it's not in Alaska, it's actually in Idaho. But the point is the same. We have access to wild game, which is naturally organic, wild-caught salmon, which has high-quality fat, and high-quality protein. There's a real big difference in the impact of our food selection on health and longevity due to the fact that there's differences in what it contains. The higher the quality of protein, the more it's going to help us theoretically preserve our muscle. Another thing that's interesting, how many of you know why this salmon's red?
Embarrassed, she said.
It's embarrassed? I thought you said it's eating berries. And I was like, I've never seen one eat berries. If you live here, you may know more, for longer than 2 years, you may know more than I do. Quite possible. There's a compound called astaxanthin. Okay? And the reason why it's in wild-caught salmon is because those wild-caught salmon eat plankton and krill and things like that. And those organisms have this in them, and it's a really, and the salmon is able to absorb it. You ever heard of white kings? Yeah. They have a genetic anomaly where they can't process astaxanthin, and so they can't store it. Doesn't mean that wild kings don't taste good, but they don't have that particular meat doesn't have a high antioxidant capacity that these wonderful sockeyes right here have. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. We tend to think of certain foods as having only one particular quality, but a lot of times they have multiple benefits. in terms of improving our health and longevity. Can you still hear me? Okay. I'm really not good at holding a microphone. I don't have any practice. So anyway, made that point. The other thing that I want to tell you is the whole hunter-gatherer lifestyle. You heard the paleo diet? Paleo diet, in my mind, is a huge misnomer. Because, those people that were paleo, they weren't sitting on the front porch waiting for the meat truck to come by and deliver it to them, were they? They were having to get out and get active and go get the sources of nutrition that were responsible for potentially their overall improvements in their metabolic health. If you're out walking around 5 or 6 hours a day and you finally get something to eat and it's not high in saturated fat and it has high quality protein, it's a good day for your health and longevity. This is the last day of actually an elk hunt. It's just a picture of Cherie that we finally decided to go home. But nonetheless, we were really active for those days. Those days while we were hunting. Let me shift gears just a little bit, and I'm going to come back to nutrition. But I want to talk about something specific to Alaska that typically, well, not entirely specific to Alaska. States like Minnesota, upstate New York, Maine, they have this little great situation where they have the opportunity to be active when it's cold outside. All right? And one of the things I want to talk to you about is that, how many of you have heard about brown fat? I was hoping that you have, because this is something that's become kind of a popular topic here lately. You hear about how brown fat's important and yada, yada, yada. And why is it important? Because it could potentially help us burn more calories, even at risk. Now, we know that from studies done with exercise training that the stimulus that comes from exercise in itself helps us release things that stimulate brown fat, okay, or stimulate thermogenesis. Thermogenesis is a term that just means that I'm generating heat. Okay, if I'm generating heat, I'm generating heat through the process of burning calories. Now, I don't want to talk too fast through it, but I want you to kind of understand where I'm coming from. Now, how many of you know, I'll give you an analogy to try to help you understand a little bit. If I eat a Snickers bar, what hormone am I going to release into my bloodstream? Insulin. Absolutely right. If I don't secrete insulin, if I can't secrete insulin at all, what do I have? Type 1 diabetes, probably. Or late development of type 2 diabetes. Now, when I exercise, I release similar things like I release when I eat a Snickers bar, or even when I eat pretty much anything, I'm going to release insulin. I just gave you kind of a best case scenario. So when I exercise, I release compounds called, a couple of different compounds called, or one in particular called irisin. Okay, and this irisin helps me develop more brown fat, or increase my brown fat, or thermogenesis derived from brown fat. Does that make some sense? All right. And not only that, but one of the things we've learned about fat tissue in and of itself is it's not some just inert depot that maybe doesn't look as good as we think it should look or whatever. It actually makes things. It actually contributes to different types of things in the body beyond just being a storage depot of calories. And it can change its conformation. We've got white adipose tissue, we've got brown fat on the other end, and white adipose tissue, through the process of exercise, can change or modify a little and become more like the brown fat. And that helps us burn more calories. Those are called beige adipose tissue cells. Isn't that interesting? Not that. I mean, for scientists, they really had to reach deep going for that. White, beige, and brown. And it sounds like a clothing store. So the point is we knew that exercise helped stimulate that process to some extent, but I wanted to find out, hey, what if we mix this up in a situation where we get the biggest response? Well, anybody know what the longest and coldest ultra marathon is in the world? You're looking at it, the Yukon Arctic Ultra. The 430-mile race around the 1st of February, where, well, there's 26, 100, 300, and 430 miles, depending upon your desire to punish yourself. All joking aside, these are some of the participants in this race, and it starts for the 430-mile in Whitehorse, Yukon, and goes to Dawson City, Yukon. So I want to find out if I take these individuals that are competing in this race, that are already exercising before the race, training before the race, and then expose themselves to really cold temperature. And this past year it was really cold, like negative 55 actually at the starting line. And this is kind of as a sidebar, you can see my extreme dedication to science here, making sure the samples get in the freezer thing, which I don't even know why I used it, given the environment. Probably colder outside than inside. But what we found is really interesting, despite the fact that these levels of these hormones, irisin and fibroblast growth factor, which is just kind of fancy science talk, prior to the race, they were about 3 times higher than a normal untrained. But during the race, they actually increased significantly. And what this showed is, despite the fact that these people were well trained, when you added on top of that cold exposure, you got an even bigger response. And you got more thermogenesis and more kcal expenditure, such that these individuals, we actually had these, you heard of the Fitbit things? We had an actigraph monitor, which is like a Fitbit on steroids or a Volkswagen, or a Porsche compared to a Volkswagen. The actigraph really gives you a tremendous amount of data. And we can predict how many calories they burn using these actigraphs, but the amount of adipose tissue they lost was like 50% greater than the amount of caloric expenditure predicted by the actigraph. Now, what does that show you? That shows you there's a lot of thermogenesis going on. So these hormones right here are every bit as important to thermogenesis as insulin is to helping you soak up the glucose from that Snickers bar. Does that help close the loop a little bit on it? So, point being, in Alaska we have an opportunity to take advantage of that. Take advantage of some thermogenesis. And this figure, I didn't collect these data here. This is actually data collected from a really fancy lab in Boston, where they just expose these individuals for a brief period, I think like 2 hours. And this is the darker, if you can see, these are basically, you can see the skeleton, the head up here at the top, stomach down here, arms on both sides. The brown fat is represented by the darker color. And so you can see with a short amount of cold exposure, there's a lot of brown fat thermogenesis taking place, or brown adipose tissue activity. So, exercise and cold exposure is extremely important. And exercise alone in and of itself is really important. It just creates another motivation to get outside when it's dark, when we don't feel like it, we've got a real advantage in terms of helping burn more calories with exercise living in Alaska. I'm not saying run out in your boxer shorts when it's 20 below. That's not what I'm getting at. Protect yourself, those types of things. But cold exposure, these athletes in the Yukon Arctic Ultra, they had clothes on. But they were also exposed to really, really, really cold weather. So anyway, the point is that can be very, very beneficial for you. Now, one of the things that, just switching gears just a little bit, one of the things that we did when I was back in Arkansas is we did a study comparing exercise training without weight loss, exercise training with weight loss, and caloric restriction. And what we did is we matched the caloric restriction group and the exercise training group with weight loss and had these people lose an equivalent amount of weight, all right, over a 12-week period. And what we found is with exercise training and weight loss, visceral fat is probably one of the worst depots for adipose tissue that we can. It's not going to turn in or develop brown fat characteristics. All right, it has a very negative effect on our metabolic health. So exercise can help us tremendously, both in terms of just losing one of the fat depots that has the most negative effect on our metabolic health, and in conjunction with cold exposure, it can help us burn more calories overall. One of the problems, though, with exercise in and of itself is it's difficult to get enough for those individuals that need it most. All right, it's kind of like, in some cases, it's kind of like an individual that has, with diabetes, type 2 diabetes, for example, you don't just wake up with it really bad the next morning and then you're healthy the previous day. It's kind of like you're walking down the road. Any of you ever watch those murder mysteries? You see the individual making mistakes all along the way. Don't do that. I'm telling you, don't do that. Oh, look what's going to happen now. All right, well, the same type of thing in some ways with metabolic disease. We get up in the morning, you don't think anything about it, we keep walking, keep eating foods that aren't good for us, keep not walking, keep moving in a direction that's not good for us. And eventually, our metabolic health has deteriorated so much that our fitness level has deteriorated also, such that we can't exercise enough to really burn many calories. And I just did a little quick thing here. A 180-pound female with an ability to exercise at 1.6 liters of oxygen consumption per minute. All that means, that helps me predict like how many calories they can burn. Going to have to exercise 90 minutes a day to burn 700 calories, 5 days a week. That's going to translate to 1 pound of weight loss per week. Okay? This is a come to the truth moment of what exercise will do. And this is why a lot of people, I think, become disenchanted with it. It's like, I've been exercising and I'm not losing any weight. Well, we found out part of the reason why that's the case. Now, there's some things we can do to get past that, and I've talked about that a little bit. But those are the facts and in a lot of ways, or they give you at least a context to think about. Now, the good side of it is, in 8 to 12 weeks, I can get a 20 to 50% increase in my oxygen consumption, which translates to more calories burned within a given time period. All right? If someone told you today, if you give me $1, I'll give you back 50 cents every day for the next 12 weeks. Good return on your investment. Wish I had some investments like that. Now, that's not exactly the same scenario, but we can see up to a 50% improvement in 12 weeks. So as we continue to exercise, we raise our caloric expenditure. We get better at burning more calories in a shorter period of time. And so we decrease the time to 45 minutes instead of 70 minutes, and we're still losing about the same amount. Another important message, and this is something I try to tell everybody, is your muscles and your adipose tissue, they have never seen a gym. They don't know whether you joined a fitness center or whether you're packing out an elk or whether you're down fishing for salmon and hauling them up the bank. Your muscles, in fact, they don't communicate in that language. They don't think it. So for some people, it's good to join a fitness center or to use. I call it a necessary evil because I don't like really working out in a gym that much. I mean, I'll do it, but I'm not just grinning ear to ear going, "Oh, well, gym, it's great." I do it because I want to do other things. So if I think we change our perspective on what exercise means, exercise is anything above and beyond what you're doing right now. I'm even exercising more than you are right now. But you get my point. If you're moving, you're doing something, and that's always a benefit. Now, why worry about all this stuff? We all get old. And this little guy is one of the most fascinating creatures, I think, he or she can live out in the ocean in really cold water, and it looks like he's really doing nothing. It's a good example of what I was just talking about. We don't see what they're doing. We just drive on a boat and he's doing this. We think, man, he's lazy. He can really swim around. And, we don't see how much activity he's fitting within a given day. And I guarantee he's not a member of the gym. But why he's not worried about it, everybody gets old. Why should we worry about it? Well, I don't think worry is the right word. I think concern and preparation is the right term. And part of the reason we need to be concerned is an economic one. Not just because of our own selfish existence, but the fact that the number of people that are the older segment of population is increasing and going to continue to increase over the next several years, up to 2050, which, if I'm fortunate enough, I'll still be around to see it. But that being said, we need to do something about it. We need to address it. Now, I talked a little bit at the beginning of the deal about how we lose muscle as we get older. Another important thing is that and I kind of touched on it for just a second, another important thing is if we reach some type of event when we're older that decreases our level of activity substantially, we lose muscle at a 3 times higher rate than a younger person. And that's what this figure right here shows. In people that are young, putting them in strict bed rest for 28 days. These are some NASA studies. I actually didn't collect this data, but a colleague of mine did, and we kind of collapsed all this stuff together. They put young individuals at strict bed rest for a month, and they lost a small amount of muscle mass. So then you put young or elderly people in bed for 10 days, and look how much muscle mass they lose. Dramatic increase in the amount of skeletal muscle that's lost in a shorter period of time. Now, there's a little thing here in the middle with young plus cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. So if the only reason that's in there is if I really ramp up the stress response in young people, I can get a similar amount of muscle loss. But that's really not the point of the slide. The point of the slide is that elderly individuals or older individuals are at an increased risk for losing skeletal muscle with unanticipated bed rest. Now, your mom used to tell you, or mom, that's what we call our mother in the South, mom. Okay? Mother used to tell you, oh, get some rest. Well, when you're young, that's fine. But as you get older, get back on your feet as quick as you can. As quick as you feel like you can. And be safe about it. In fact, when I was in graduate school, it seems like, in some ways not that long ago, in some ways like a long time ago, I was working in a hospital up in Memphis. And I was getting people up after they had heart surgery and walking them around, which is one of those boring things. At first it's fun. It's kind of interesting, you learn medical history, that kind of thing. But then you're walking slow. Like this. I literally fell asleep several times walking. But for these people, all joking aside, it's extremely important for them to get back up on their feet. And they were waiting 4 and 5 days after heart surgery. Now they've got to back up on their feet in 24 hours, don't they? I'm sure you have family members that have been through that. That demonstrates exactly what I'm talking about. Is the quicker you can get back up on your feet, the better. This particular slide here shows the negative relationship between the loss of, or negative relationship between lean tissue and, or loss of lean tissue and decrease in the extension strength with bed rest. So, how do we combat this? How do we get around this? You told me a little bit about nutrition to start with, and then you changed everything, started talking about these people doing this cold weather thing. How do we pull all this together? Well, one of the ways we do it is we utilize exercise. Another way we do it is we utilize nutrition, or powerful nutrition. And we know, all of us science geeks know this, that, most of us, muscle protein is in a constant state of flux. It's kind of like, the reason I'm standing here is my checking account's in a constant state of flux. So I'm synthesizing and degrading at the same time. And so you've kind of got a yin and yang taking place. You've got the plus side and you've got the negative side. What you do from an activity standpoint and what you do from a nutritive standpoint will influence whether you end up on the plus side of synthesis or on the negative side of synthesis. Because activity stimulates this process more than this process in the net sense. What I mean by net is at the end of the day. It's kind of like if you think about putting money into the bank, this is deposits, this is withdrawals. Most people can relate to that. If I work, generate income, I'm going to have some deposits in that. If I do physical activity, I'm going to improve the stimulation of synthesis more than breakdown. If I eat the right nutrients, I'm going to do the same thing. And if I provide the requisite amino acids through a high-quality protein, remember that term, high-quality protein? What does that mean? Does that mean it's expensive? Probably. Probably expensive. Means two things. When these amino acids come by my muscle, there's certain ones that it's looking for as they're traveling by through the bloodstream. And the muscle goes, take that one and that one. I don't really need this one here, so that one can go on by. And then this one, it's kind of looking for what it needs. And so high-quality protein has more of these amino acids that are necessary for the muscle to optimize synthesis. It also, at the same time, our gut extracts certain proteins better than others. It extracts meat or amino acids from meat proteins better than plant proteins. That's why a cow can chew several times to get squeeze all the protein. How many stomachs you got? 1 or 4? You got 1. Okay, and so that's what we do as humans is we take out preferentially certain proteins that we need, and then our muscle is able to synthesize those or use those amino acids to synthesize muscle protein. So what we did is we tried to figure out a technique to determine what's the best way to stimulate muscle protein synthesis from a nutrition standpoint. So how am I going to do that? Well, how many of you ever caught a tag fish or knew somebody that caught one? Okay, a couple of people. What do biologists or physiologists use tag fish for? They kind of want to know how many are being caught, how big they are. They want to trace what's taking place in terms of the fishery. And so they'll tag a bunch of fish and chunk them in a pond, and they kind of know how many they threw in there, and they kind of know how many people bought fishing licenses, and based on the number of fish that get caught with tags, they know how many people are catching fish to some extent. It's not exactly an exact science. That's a redundant statement, but the point is, it's a way for them to trace what's taking place. Now, what we do in the even worse scientific geek world is we take amino acid that looks a little bit different, but it's already in the body, and we can trace quantities, and we infuse this amino acid while the person's eating something or after they've eaten something, and we can trace the incorporation of that amino acid into this picture right here. And so I dip my little muscle biopsy down into that muscle, or needle down and take a little muscle biopsy down into that muscle, take it out, and then I can determine how much of that tracer is going in there. And from that, I can determine what food is having a more powerful impact on net synthesis. You follow me? If you don't, say, hey, I don't get that. Stop. Hang on a second. But that's back when I had hair. Okay, and what we determined, I just gave up. My wife loves it short, so it's a deal all the way around. And what we found out is that with this particular figure here, what I want you to see is really two things. Okay, in the rested or fasted state, my net synthesis is not net ingest a balanced formula of amino acids, kind of similar to what I would get in a feedlot, what I call a feedlot protein source, I get an improvement in muscle protein synthesis, no question about it. 40 grams, I get a bump in it. But if I ingest a specific amount of essential amino acids, 18 grams, about half of that, but just the ones that the muscle's looking for. So I can reduce the amount of calories that the person has to eat, and they get the same promotion of muscle protein synthesis. Those are the two things I want you to get. When we're in the fastest state, if you're just constantly in the fastest state, you're going to lose skeletal muscle. It's going to happen. Even if you exercise, you're going to gradually lose some skeletal muscle. Generally speaking, exercise will help prevent some of that. But powerful nutrition will help you retain most of it with minimal caloric intake. And this is just another reiteration of that, where we tweaked this even just a little bit more and provided it in the context of meal replacement. Very small amount of calories. I mean, the total caloric intake here is like 200 calories compared to a competitive meal replacement, which I'm not going to name, but you can buy it at Walmart. And it didn't work too well. Still got improvement in muscle protein synthesis, but not as high as the formulation that we developed, because we figured out which ones promote the process most effectively. So, that being said, how can we, I don't want to say backtrack, but how can we go back to whole foods or intact foods? Because it's great to have a formula, but how can I most closely get to that formula through something I can access and something I don't have to buy off some internet site, or I'm waiting for it. People ask me, when are you going to still do it? We're still working on that whole aspect. So in the meantime, what can we do to help improve our retention of skeletal muscle? I don't know if you can see that, but one thing that's important is the amount of leucine that's in what we call intact protein. This is actually a girl right here. Well, she's a girl, my wife, but this is a girl fish. And she's got leucine and other essential amino acids, which are really important towards promoting that protein synthesis. It's also got greater levels of omega-3 and omega-6s compared to feedlot protein. And I'm not again, I use the term feedlot protein. What I mean is, sirloin you get at Walmart. That's feedlot protein. If it's not grass-fed, it's feedlot. And if it's feedlot, it doesn't have a very good fatty acid profile. And in the process, we can promote anabolic efficiency, maintain our muscle, and there's also some carcinogenic compounds in some farm-raised meats that this will help us stay away from. You say, well, I've heard that there's mercury in salmon. There is some. But compared to some of the things that are in your more commercial sources of meat protein, probably not as big of a concern, at least in my mind. So, all of this kind of centers around one term that you can tie to health and longevity. And that's a term that I describe as anabolic efficiency. How can I become, I gave you the analogy of your bank account, and you don't have to look very far on the radio to find somebody to help you improve your financial efficiency. Got all these folks out there now, talk about use this strategy and that strategy and to help you save more money and pay your house off quicker and yada yada. Things that make you sick if you're not doing it as effectively as you'd like to be doing it. But how do I improve my anabolic efficiency? Well, we talked about how the elderly population is going to increase. These are reasons why this is important. Sarcopenic obesity is commonly observed in elderly individuals. Simultaneous loss of muscle and retention of excess fat taking place at the same time. And while the common treatment is caloric restriction in and of itself is going to promote a decrease in muscle mass and potentially increase the likelihood of disability once you reach the age of 60 years old. It may be even younger. I don't know a geriatrician, and I that would recommend caloric restriction to somebody past the age of 55. Because you're going to lose muscle that you're going to need to take care of yourself later on. It's that simple. And if you want to do any kind of activity-based lifestyle, you're really compromising yourself. So anabolic efficiency requires unique formulations of essential amino acids. I mentioned one, leucine. You can look on your food ingredients when, not on your intact proteins like salmon or what have you, but I can tell you wild caught salmon is higher in leucine than farm-raised salmon. Your grass-fed meats are higher in leucine. You can take advantage of that information when you're making your food choices. Are they a little bit more expensive? Yeah, but you know what? Medical care is expensive too. So these are all things to kind of roll around. So anabolic efficiency just helps me take advantage of that and augments my muscle synthesis and helps me improve my muscle mass in spite of weight loss. And when I use the term muscle mass, don't confuse that with Arnold Schwarzenegger's muscle mass. Of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger, you take a look at pictures of him now, and pictures of him when he was strutting on Venice Beach, he doesn't look the same, does he? I don't look the same when I didn't strut on Venice Beach, but the point is, as we get older, we lose that muscle, and it becomes important not from an aesthetic standpoint, but from a health and longevity standpoint. Synthetic formulations have their benefits and might be even linked to things like food security or some kind of catastrophic event or something like that where maybe we don't have availability of intact proteins like we'd like to have. So they have their place, but I'm a big believer in trying to make sure that we take advantage of all of our intact proteins. So the overall goal is healthy aging. I began the talk talking about or mentioning that I'm humbled by people, humbled by you coming to hear me talk today or hear the presentation today. Number one, because of the smoke, and number two, because you've been around, some of you, a good bit longer than I have, and you've already determined some of the other things that I haven't even mentioned. Like, for example, I think the first public lecture I gave in the Shiloh Auditorium a couple years ago, there's an individual from Toad, and after people asked questions and everything, he raised his hand. He said, "I've got the secret, Doc." Which I found kind of comical when I called him Doc. But I've got the secret. And I said, "What's that?" He said, "A healthy attitude." He said, "That's the first and foremost thing." So, and I think he's exactly right, but in order to implement these things, you've got to have a healthy attitude to begin with. You don't walk into it with that. Anything and everything I talked about today is probably not going to do good. So, the overall goal is healthy aging, and there's multiple things that you have to utilize to get there, and I've just talked about a few. Let me just quickly acknowledge some people that I've worked with over the past few years. I'm just giving a presentation. I've obviously been involved in all the stuff most of the stuff I've showed you, unless I mentioned that I wasn't. But I didn't do it myself. I didn't do it all myself. And these individuals are extremely important. Dr. Don Bodiner is actually recognized as one of the top 100 physicians in the United States. If you ever know anybody that's got thyroid cancer, he's a top-notch guy to get some advice on that topic. Dr. Gene Sagonis is, I'm sure probably some of them, almost a local celebrity here. Everybody knows her. Is working with me on some of these projects. Bill Evans is a co-investigator with, and actually he works for another company now. Scott Schulster is a nurse that I work with at Arkansas. Rick Williams, a technician. Bob Wolf is a co-investigator and also president's professor here at UAF. Tyler Keschel is a graduate student that worked with me last year. Matthias Stenuck is a physician from the University of Berlin that worked with me on a project related to cold exposure and exercise that I showed you. And these are the funding resources. Without funding, we can't do this type of work. And the funding that I've received the most funding from the American Heart Association and National Institutes of Health. And this is just this is focused on one particular problem, but they certainly provided a lot of resources for us over the years. So thank you so much And now comes the lights. Now comes the questions. Yes, ma'am.
In the stores, you'll see bottles of protein and in some kind of liquid. Are those any good?
She asked a question. The bottles of protein and the liquid.
Yeah.
Are those any good? Is that?
Yes. Is it worthwhile?
Depending on what it is, yes. Or what's contained in it, yes. And I don't want to. I own a company with two other individuals, and we're developing condition-specific products. We don't have anything long, but we hope to. One of the reasons why we got involved in that is the papers that we publish. I doubt that any of you have read them, and if you have, I'm amazingly impressed. But we read each other's papers, and we think, oh, that's a good thing, and what have you. But we want to translate back to your question, and that is provide you with the most effective adjunct or the most effective product to help you address some of these concerns. There are any of the whey protein formulations, if you see WHEY, that's a very high quality protein. You'll see whey protein isolate, you'll see Myoplex, you'll see a variety of different products. Those are all, if they have whey protein as one of the first ingredients, that's generally a pretty good product. Some individuals will say, soy protein is better or whatever. We've done studies to compare them to, and whey protein is more beneficial in stimulating muscle protein synthesis. So the reason why I'm saying that is we have data to support it. I don't have any ownership or interest in any of those companies to tell you that, but that's what our data has shown.
As we age, the digestive enzymes decrease. So how does the good quality protein is digested as we need it as we age, but at the same time we don't have the digestive enzymes that say 25-year-olds?
The question is, as we age, our profile for digestive enzymes change. Okay, how do we address that? And it's actually a really, really good question. Well, there's a couple of different ways. One, you can use intact sources of meat protein that generally you will digest better anyway, and you can also take digestive enzymes as an adjunct to that. And as you can tolerate. There are several different digestive enzyme products on the market now. Some are more specifically targeted at digestion of fats. Some are more specifically targeted at just overall better digestion. I would kind of seek out which ones tend to work better for you individually. Generally speaking, I can tell you that in the elderly individuals that participated in the studies that we've done, you can tell pretty quickly from a subjective standpoint what's working better for you. You will notice a difference, and just your overall sense of well-being pretty quickly. I know that sounds like snake oil kind of stuff, but that's what I've heard older people tell me when they found something that worked.
Also, I just read a recent study that was on people as they age and their ability to chew, and actually chewing longer, the better you can chew, and the longer you chew your food and the more you digest it in your mouth before it gets to your stomach, also affects your digestibility and your absorption rate. So that's just something you can do very simply to increase absorption and digestion.
Very, very.
Right?
No. So,
Yeah, I was just curious what you eat. What kind of a diet do you follow? What would you recommend as far as just not a technical question, but just...
well, I'll tell you, one of the things that Tiffany left out of the embarrassingly extensive biographical sketch was, or bio, is about, it's been longer than I thought, about 7 years ago. I had an ATV accident. I broke back when I was in Arkansas. I got my four-wheeler out of the ditch by myself. Nobody was with me. My own stupid mistake of looking off the road and paying attention. Paid the price for it. And the point of the story is up until that point, I didn't even really think about nutrition very much. I mean, I did. I understood and appreciated people like Tiffany that were, dietitians and had that background. And I had a lot of coursework during my PhD that was nutrition focused, but I was just like, exercise is a panacea for everything. It doesn't matter, doesn't make any difference. Just get out and lift weights and run and yada, do all those necessary evils and you'll be fine. But when I was faced with that challenge, I had to adapt my approach because I was down for about a month. About 2 weeks to start with, and then I had what they call a post-trauma injury. And so I was down, my spine basically grew in the wrong direction, and it looks really strange now. But it pulled my spinal column over the side, and I had all these ruptured discs and ruptured mucus inside the disc, which is like, what do they call it? What's the term for it in the South? Throwing the gas on fire. Okay. Throwing gas on fire. And so it got my attention. And all of a sudden, I was like, not all of a sudden, but it really, really made a difference in my ability to understand people's challenges, whatever they've been faced with. And I gained an increased appreciation for that. So I mentioned that as kind of an intro to your question because I became a lot more focused on eating more healthy and preserving my muscle. I lost a bunch of muscle really, really quickly in a post-trauma injury. And it affected my quality of life. I had to think more about my nutrition. My approach is one of the, and Tiffany, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the guidelines, dietary guidelines, is eat a variety of foods. Sounds really simple, but how many of us fall into the trap of not eating a variety of foods? I'm fortunate enough that, I'm married to somebody that cooks a lot of different variety of foods, and so it's a little bit easier for me, but that's very important because I just touched on protein for the most part and some other things, but don't misunderstand that it's important to get all your green vegetables, it's important to get a lot of green leafy vegetables in the most uncooked state if you can stand. Retain more of the nutrients. If you cook them, take the broth and put it in something else and eat that. I mean, use some approaches that you don't really have to pay any extra money for, but you can get the benefits out of it. If you can grow your own garden, that's fantastic because you get fresh vegetables. And guess what you're doing while you're gardening your own fresh vegetables? Burning calories. I mean, and you potentially might get to work with one of your family members, or what you get the social interaction. I didn't even talk about that. Social interaction in our lives is extremely important. And so that's kind of my answer to your question. But a variety of foods is extremely important.
Just thinking back on that question, what do you think as we age about plant-based diets? Do we get enough protein from plants to maintain our muscular health?
That's a really important question, and it's one that I get not all the time, but I think with plant-based diets, exercise becomes even more important because of the exercise in itself helps stimulate muscle protein synthesis, especially resistance exercise, and resistance exercise also has a beneficial effect on bone. Okay, and so like let's say if I'm on a plant-based diet and I'm not getting much dairy, then I've also got to be thinking about my bone at the same time. If I'm putting a load on that's one of the things that helped me in my particular accident. I was doing a lot of resistance training, a lot, not like Mark Schwarzenegger, but a lot. And my bone mineral density scores were like off the charts. And it wasn't because, I was not on a plant-based diet, but it wasn't because I was being really, really careful about my nutrition. I can tell you that, but it's just largely because of the beneficial effect of the exercise. So the answer to your question is you just have to use more tools. And it can be done, but it becomes becomes an increasing challenge as you get older. When you're younger, when you're in your 20s and 30s and 40s, you've got so much resilience from a hormonal standpoint, from an age-related standpoint, from an activity level standpoint, that you can kind of offset some of those potential deficiencies in amino acid availability. But as you get older, it becomes increasingly relevant to use all the tools that you have.
Your slides mentioned about 18 essential amino acids. What foods do those take?
18 grams. And in that particular slide, it was a formula that we used, not a particular food. You could not, from a food source in and of itself, you could not replicate that response. But you could get closer to it. And I kind of touched on that a little bit. Like, for example, Cherie is the first, somewhat of a conflict of interest, but I'm going to make a plug for what she's doing. She is one of the first ones, not the first one, to make a direct comparison with feedlot protein, or what I consider to be feedlot protein, or lower quality meat protein, and higher quality meat protein like wild-caught salmon, or caribou, or grass-fed reindeer. Never been done before. It's astonishing that it hasn't been done. And then we do all these, shake and bake metabolic studies in the science lab. But what can I do when I go to Fred Meyer to try to get the same benefit that you just described? Talking. And I think that's something that we're working on to try to get a good answer to that. Because really, when it comes down to it, if I'm not concerned about calories, it doesn't matter. I just eat as much as I want. But as I get older, I have to become more and more concerned about calories. And so I want to have the highest anabolic efficiency that I can have. In other words, get the most powerful and most robust response from the most small amount of calories. And so we're working towards that. Hopefully in a couple of years she can get up and do that talk and make a comparison between the two. That's a good question.
Within research you've done, you've spoken about the need for high-quality protein, but have you looked at the destructive effects of the high or poor quality carbohydrates that many people are eating in their calorie choices?
The question is, you did a wonderful job talking about protein. You talked about high quality protein, but have you done anything to evaluate the detrimental impact of high consumption of poor quality carbohydrates? The answer is no. To me, it's a foregone conclusion. And let me clarify that. If I'm eating a highly processed diet with a lot of poor quality carbohydrates, here's what happened. Let me just give you a brief, I'll try to be brief. If I look at this, and this is time, because I think this will help it make more sense. And I ingest a poor quality carbohydrate, and this is my sugar in my blood. This is what's going to happen. Ingestion, boom, something like that. In a healthy person. Right? In a non-healthy person, boom, and it keeps on going down the line. And what am I doing when I've got that sugar level up that high? I'm not burning very much fat. I'm promoting what we call lipogenesis. Well, you know your Bible very good. You know what genesis means. I'm not going to preach to you at all, but the point is you're beginning the storage of fat, right? With a higher quality carbohydrate, you typically absorb it slower, something like this, and you don't get that much of a response. And so you generally, and I'm making this is an oversimplification, admittedly, but you generally optimize your ability to burn fat at the fasted state. Okay? Not only that, but in conjunction with what I just described, if I draw another thing over here, and I call this insulin, with a poor quality carbohydrate, I get a really, really high insulin response too. And that also dampens my ability to burn fat or utilize fat. So that's why I say, the microphone, dicey. That's why I say it's a foregone conclusion. I already know that. I know that if I eat low quality carbohydrates or something that gives me what we call high glycemic index, that's a combination of high glucose and high insulin, it's not a good situation. Unless I'm out there running 15 miles a day. Then I can be really, really resilient in my ability to deal with this. One reason is because if I'm running that much, my muscles are going, hello, I need some glucose in here, because it's going to store that for the next time I challenge it when I'm out there running. But if I'm not doing that, then I'm not providing that challenge to it. And that's why an individual that exercises for longer periods of time, like Dr. Wolf that I mentioned, still runs 10 miles a day and he's 67 years old. He's averaged about 80 miles a week for 30 years. Sometimes in the middle of the night, he gets up and goes down and eats a half gallon of ice cream. He can get away with it. I can't. All right? I don't like to run that much. Most people don't. And so when you ask a question like that, in a way it's a foregone conclusion, but in a way it requires a more specific application to the particular individual. You see what I'm getting at? And like for the same reason, if you and I both have a headache, does that mean that your headache's the same as mine? Mine might be worse, yours might be worse. Mine might be a migraine. If you hand me 200 milligrams of ibuprofen and I got a migraine headache, what am I going to do as a doctor? I'm not going to be happy. Specific application to that particular individual is critical, whether it's nutrition, whether it's pharmaceuticals, and especially when prescribing some type of lifestyle intervention. When you're talking about a lifestyle intervention, it's a prescription. It doesn't have to have pharma in front of it to be a prescription necessarily. I mean, you got to have a pharmacist, don't get me wrong, but if Tiffany's going to counsel somebody about their diet, or I'm going to counsel somebody about their exercise routine or whatever, you're going to know something about that. What are your goals? What are your challenges? What are your limitations? It's like the example I gave you of my particular scenario. If somebody were to come to me and say, hey, well, Trey, you're going to have to start lifting a lot. You're going to have to start doing a lot of squats and da-da-da. How much do you know about me? I can't really do that. You see that answer your question?
In your research over the course of your career, have you found that, let's say, endurance activities would be better to control insulin rather than resistance type training, or what are your thoughts on that?
I actually sent in a grant application about 8 years ago to do that, and they didn't like it very much. But they did like some other people's better than mine, and what they found is that in most cases it's roughly equivalent. I think that the data has kind of borne that out. The tough thing, I don't want to get too much in the weeds on this, but the tough thing with that is when it really comes down to it, it's all about weight loss in terms of the question that you asked, and to kind of go back just a second, is what's better, resistance exercise or weightlifting exercise or running in terms of improving your metabolic health? And my answer is you're basically about the same. With one important caveat, and that is if they initiate weight loss, generally speaking, you'll see a pretty positive response. If they don't, number, it makes it tougher on them. And resistance training tends to have a beneficial effect to be able to get up out of the chair, to be able to do more than aerobic training. Another thing about aerobic training is typically with the elderly individuals, it's unless you have access to a treadmill, it's kind of tough. And you don't really want to sit on a bike very long. But you can pick up some paint buckets, just a gallon of paint and do this and improve your metabolic health.
Got a follow-up question?
Yeah.
When you were doing the biopsy,
Tiffany's a police officer here, so.
when you were doing the biopsy on the muscle mass, so you're using the thigh. Was that just because it's a large muscle and it's more convenient rather than, let's say, arms or back or something like that?
It's easy. I can blindfold myself and throw your leg at you and contract it. Right there, it's just easy. You can do it on the tricep, you can do it on the trap, gluteus muscle back here. You can do it on the bicep. Generally, people tolerate a little bit better. You don't have many pain receptors right here. But we would always use a local anesthetic, same stuff that they use for your teeth. You don't feel it. I've had it done myself. Or I've been a person who's donated some muscle myself. So it's not a painful procedure. The worst part about it is just like the dentist when they give you the shot. It stings after a minute. Do it. But it's just because it's a big muscle. It's a mixed muscle. You've got fast and slow twitch in there. It doesn't hurt to me right my leg. It looks like 9 years ago. But anyway. All right. Well, thank everyone. That's
wow, I could sit here and listen to you talk about this stuff all day long. Thank you so much for attending. 3 things that I'm supposed to mention before I forget. So you can sign up for email reminders for summer sessions there on the yellow pad. Number 2, these sessions are recorded, so now you're famous, superstar. And they come out about a week to 2 weeks after, so you can get all of the summer Healthy Living lecture series online at UAF.edu/summer, and they're there. And then the last thing is that next week we have Dr. Wren, who is one of our cardiologists here in town, and he'll be talking about lengthening the health span. So probably just more stuff on those same lines that Dr. Coker did. So thank you so much for attending, and have a good evening.
Hey, Bill. How you doing? See you. See you next Wednesday night.
These must be his.
Oh, you want to? Oh,
These are, yeah, they're not yours.
no, I think they're his.
They're his.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Sorry that we never. I have no idea.
Well, I just
Oh.
I've got another one. I'll lose it.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. That would be awesome. Is it only to Honolulu, or would it go to?
Companion for Alaska.
Okay.
So Philadelphia.
No, that would be awesome. I will. We have. There's a travel agent that we'll be using, but
Well,
he's.
you can give these to me.
Okay, that's awesome. Because then if you could do
Sounds like you got
that.
enough fast to give it to me. Since we have to waste it.
Well, that would be awesome. So I appreciate that. I'll let you know. I don't know when we're leaving, but we'll only have like a week to go. cost to get
Yeah,
China.
some egg milk is the same.
I think it's from, if we can at least get to Seattle, that would still save a chunk.
Of course, I'm not
Okay.
talking very fast.
Well, thank you so much. Well, thanks. That would be awesome. Am I?
I think that the sources of protein are really the focus of the topic because
Yeah, I saw you the last time, the last one I came to, and I
if
started
we eat
coughing,
full
and I
quality
coughed, I had
we
to.
easily eat too much fat. But the reason why
It's allergies to something.
is because
I mean, smoke. Yeah, and then the air conditioning does it.
we think of those as sources of fish and red meat. I mean, by definition, red meat's bad.
Yeah. Well,
Well, if you break apart or tease apart the constituents,
okay. Hey, it's not.
in other words, that measurement is non-specific to most. It's in a younger population using methodologies that are non-specific. And you never think about having a CT scan of your gut to determine what's in your brain. I'm being kind of silly, but you see what I'm getting at. One of the things that has been beneficial for us in the scientific literature is being able to retrieve the that's the way actually kind of numbers on the board. And a process. See, these are already been fleshed out pretty well.
We grill them.
On the other side is recommendations been based on methodologies that are really non-specific. And sometimes there can be a misinterpretation. But I would agree with the statement that we eat too much meat from low quality but a lot of even nutrition textbooks, they'll open up and they'll have the food guide here and they'll have a piece of meat.
Are they grass fed?
And that's kind of the point is that Lane made the comment about, well, I would recognize that. I would recognize that.
You know, and
But we don't recognize necessarily the meats
nowhere in comparison.
or the fats of them.
No, I don't think it's
No, it's not in our heads.
At least when I was in before that wasn't. It was like the way that
You bet. I'm glad to know.
they were fed. And they could have changed it, but the grass fed.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. My mother still lives within 8 miles of it.
I University of Engineering, and I teach.
Right, and not that I don't know. I mean, yeah, but it's good. I think that's what I like to do. Actually,
Surveying teachers.
watching.
And so, Georgia Tech sponsored it. The Georgia Tech used to have a summer camp for the trainers at Dahlonega. So we went to Dahlonega for 10 days, and it's kind of
Neat little town.
That would be awesome.
yeah, and
Well,
down at
with
anyway, yeah.
cattle,
Dahlonega used to be a U.S. Mint.
that way, but there's a lot of all of that.
Yeah, that's where my roots are. My mother still lives there. In fact, I'll see her next week. She's family business. You live here?
Oh, yeah, I'm still living home. Your haircut is about as good as Bill's. The haircut is just about as good as Bill's.
He's got more hair than I do.
And that would be like,
Yes.
yeah, I just like
Very good. Well, thank you. We're happy to contribute to the community.
yeah,
Really
it would
are.
be
Fix up your back. Did you get ready to work out? You can just all do it yourself.
No, they used what they call an epidural healing cocktail to inject put the needle down into my spinal column.
You should be standing right well now.
Well, thank you. I've been very blessed. It's been a challenge, but I've been pretty blessed.
Well, great.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to Fairbanks there. I'm glad
We
you got
love it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we're old timers here.
We love it. So
Yeah,
glad
well,
you
it's a
could
good
come.
place to bring up children.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, it is.
We've got one that moved about 5,000 miles to live with us here.
Well, it's nice. A lot of good
She didn't work for the USDA, she worked for National Cattlemen's Beef.
Oh, that's what it was, yes.
Okay,
So, you know, and it's funny because I postdoc with David Washington. And then, and he's a real strong glucose metabolism guy, so I studied labs, I studied women. But I went there because of, you know, I was interested. I learned a lot, and I focused on insulin resistance and that thing for a while, and I'm still interested in it. And worked for a while, I really got to become more involved in biology and egocentric, and the least egocentric